And producer-engineer James Ash says Viewpoint is officially on the air. Good morning, Mrs. Busby.
Hi.
The program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Well, we certainly have personalities and perspectives here this morning. Once again, thankfully, leave the politician parts out. That's more fun that way, because when we start getting into that my blood pressure starts to go up, and I get to where I just mumble, don't know what I'm saying. So why don't you go ahead?
One of our guests this morning used to do what we do.
Yeah.
And
look how he improved himself.
Yes. Do you spell politician with 4 letters, or are
Yes.
you more open-minded?
Well, I try to be more open-minded, but that's probably why I'm not in radio anymore.
Is that right?
I worked at a talk radio station, and sometimes it was hard to zip it up.
Well,
To be politically correct.
Never was fond of that.
Yeah.
some older people that I am familiar with get really exercised about some of this stuff. Probably they'd live longer if they'd get less exercise, but that's enough.
Well, but we can't help it. I'd like to talk about sin.
Well, listen, she owns 51% of the show, so we got to do this. She can have,
They just passed a new sin tax, and you said that you had seen where
Larry.
Our friend Larry Bomke, who is representative of,
And we're
has
losing,
been,
unfortunately, we're losing him.
more is the pity, but he had voted against it. And we got to talking on the way up here about in the olden days when we were kids, everybody's mother and dad and friends smoked. It was
Mostly.
just the thing to do, but it's no longer politically correct.
Nor healthily correct.
Well, and that's the truth. But be that as it may, people who used to smoke, and it does include an awful lot of us, like me, and now we don't. And there's nothing like a reformed. And you can fill in the blank, And so now they pontificate and so forth. And that's the outfit to hit, because it's unpopular. I mean, with a capital U. So that's who we hit. We pick up on the smokers and give them another buck a pack,
Right.
Yeah.
Give him another one. Well, Larry said, I briefly read his remarks this morning. By the way, gentlemen, we've been very fortunate to have a gentleman like Larry Bomke represent us in this district. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they gerrymandered him out of this. Typical.
You don't think that was on purpose, do you?
Yes, I do think it was on purpose, most assuredly. In any event, he said simply, enough. Not particularly picking out the cigarette tax increase, but he said somewhere we got to start saving something instead of taxing everything. So, well, and anyway, we've got these gentlemen in here to talk about a very specific thing, and perhaps it'd be appropriate and maybe more polite if we, instead of rambling around here, if we introduced him.
Well, we could do that, yes. We have Tony Shuff with us, and Tony is the new man at the Salvation Army here in Lincoln at the Keast Center. And with a new person, we most oftentimes have new policies and new directions. And I, for one, as a longtime Salvation Army supporter and believer in her, am awfully glad to hear about this, Tony. And Tony has brought with him from the Peoria area office, Rich Draeger. And Rich is the one who used to be a radio, but he's not now.
That's right.
Except for right now.
Yeah, and he's been with the Salvation Army for how many years now?
It'll be just started my 13th year.
Well, that's a good long while.
It is.
And we were talking about PR. The Salvation Army does so much and does it so quietly, which I think is an admonition biblically, actually. But
See how smart she is? She studies well, yeah.
I'm not sure what that admonition word means, but...
There we go.
Wait till the commercial break, I'll explain it. But at any rate, here we are. And I'm so glad that you're with us. And let's start with, you mentioned that this country, now the Salvation Army, of course, is international, but this country has 4 sections. How is our particular section set up, Rich?
Sure. Well, I'll start at the local level. Lincoln is a service center. So the Salvation Army has core community centers, and that's where you would see Salvation Army officers. That's also the Salvation Army church for that community. Usually a gym is attached to the building, and then depending on the size of the town. So, for instance, Springfield is a close neighbor. They have a shelter. Some places will have daycares, so it just kind of depends on the community. And then Lincoln is part of the Heartland Division, which actually goes all the way from Danville on the Indiana border into eastern Iowa. So out of Peoria, we headquarter all of that area. So it's about 71 counties that we headquarter. And then the next level up is a territory. So we are part of the Central Territory, which is 11 Midwestern states, and the United States is divided into 4 territories. So we have an Eastern Territory, a Southern Territory, a Central Territory, and a Western Territory.
Okay. And are they all about equal in size then?
The Western Territory is probably larger geographically. It's interesting, as a matter of fact, we had some officers in Peoria who just were moved to North Dakota. They are still actually closer to Peoria than they are to their divisional headquarters because of the real estate that you have to travel to get from North Dakota to Denver or wherever the case may be. So, but they try to divide them up somewhat equally. Obviously, the Western Territory also has Hawaii, which obviously they don't travel to too often. If you're in Hawaii, you're in Hawaii, and you're not coming back and forth to the mainland that often.
One of the things that I heard about the Salvation Army, a couple of years ago or so, they were talking about the pay for the international director of, for instance, it was the Red Cross, was like $132,000 a year. The international director for the Salvation Army was $32,000 a year.
Yeah, I want to point that out. As a matter of fact, I was shuffling through my papers. I didn't find it. But the internet, that's one of the good parts of the internet. It came through as to the various executive salaries for various organizations, and certainly Salvation Army rates way down at the bottom of that poll as opposed to some of the others. However, I think I'd better shut up about that.
Why do you think you should?
Well, I'm going to pontificate again. Oh, speaking of that, the old geezer forgot that we always start. Can we go back on the air and start again, Jim?
Can you erase this part,
can we
Jim?
just start? We'll start all over again. And I'm upset about this because we always start the Viewpoint did until today anyway, a kudo for somebody or some organization in our community. And I'd like to digress just 1 minute about that. Laura Slayton and others, many others at the American Legion, organized this balloon ascension for Memorial Day, and had a very nice program out there, and had a nice turnout. The wind did not particularly cooperate because the minute the balloons were released to like that to Chicago or somewhere, right now. So they didn't gracefully go high in the sky and then drift away. And it was a very nice event, and we're going to have Laura on this program on D-Day, June the 6th. And we appreciate her effort and all the efforts of those at the Legion. So excuse me for digressing from something important like the Salvation Army, but I did want to mention that to them.
Well, I'll just re-digress then. You know what Bill did a couple years ago? He sent an email to everybody on our block and the next block. And I bet, Jim, you noticed this when you were out walking.
When you were out walking? Looked pretty good.
Buy these flags that you can buy for $1, and they're decent size, and put them in front of your house. And really, I'd say virtually everyone on the 2 blocks now had the little flags all down their sidewalk or across their front, and then their big flag flying. I'm telling you, it looked
nice.
decent. So there we go. Now, this morning we're talking about God, Mother Country, and apple pie, right?
Yes, and Salvation Farm's right in there because they do an awful lot of apple pie.
Right.
Yes, they do. Now, let's move on to our local one, Tony, if you would. You came in at I'd call a kind of a busy time. Didn't
Seemed
you?
to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
What'd you get, the short straw or something?
I don't know how that happened, actually. I kind of do. We've lived in Lincoln for over half of our life. My wife and I, Pam, have 2 daughters, and we've been a part of this community since the fall of 1978. So
They're almost ready to be old timers.
I graduated from
Getting there.
high school 40 years ago. I just celebrated 5 days ago our 38th anniversary, wedding anniversary.
Don't you wonder where the time goes?
And in those, yeah, so most of those 40 years since high school, I ended up in Lincoln. And a little FYI, or by the way, when we got married, we came to Lincoln for our honeymoon.
Did you really?
And ended up coming back to live here.
Spent a
Must
month
be-
one weekend there.
We're destined to be here. But so, to say the least, we're part of Central Illinois, have been for a long time.
Yeah.
And we've done pastoral work here and done mission work from here, both.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your mission work too, because that was so interesting when we were talking.
Sure.
You've been to places that were really out of town.
Really out of town and over the pond or across the water. Not a lot, but we've done some mission work in Poland, but before that in
Interesting.
Russia, both in 1994 and the summer of also 1996. My entire family was in Russia. We were along the Black Sea in a town. It's the only ice-free port in Russia year-round.
Really?
It's Novorossiysk. And we were there for the summers of 94 and 96. We were part of what was New Wine Fellowship at the time, later become Neighbors to Nations, which we were part of. I was on pastoral staff with them from 1986 until 2010. Clear up through that time. They became Neighbors to Nations Community Church in 2004 when I assumed lead pastorship there. So I've done pastoral work, and in the middle of all that, both in, like I said, in 94 and in 96, we went to Russia to do mission work over there. Of course, the curtain had fallen. There was more communication and accessibility, and it was good for as many churches as possible to try and bring Christian influence there. We weren't there to tear down, their Russian Orthodox Church or do anything like that. But there were some challenges there coming in as kind of new kids on the block or from people from outside. So, we faced some things. I was threatened, and there were some interesting things. I, escaped being robbed by gypsies or something. Nothing against them, but some really hairy experiences. But we were there not on a social event or sightseeing tour. We were there to help strengthen and establish new churches in the Novorossiysk area, in Anapa, in Abrao Duso and Samdolina, some villages and areas near Novorossiysk, and went back because of some difficulties with those places to re-strengthen them and encourage the believers. Today, we're thankfully, through Facebook and other communication, we've stayed in contact with a few of these people, and a young believer from 1994 who, he was a new believer, and he had a girlfriend that was not of the Christian faith at all.
Yeah.
And
Well, that was rampant.
right. And he came out of some coarse circumstances. But that young man today pastors a thriving church and is part of hundreds of churches throughout the Ukraine and Russia, New England, and even that group has established some churches in America, I understand. So, small things, despise not the day of small beginnings. And what any of us do, looking back on that or in all of our lives, it's important what we do, how we say it, but mostly what we do, because we're not going to be remembered. I think of heaven. God's not going to say, well said. We're going to look for well done. And so we want to say it right, but we want to do it right, too.
Or more appropriately, what have you done for me recently?
And do right. And we want to be current. So we've carried that's pastoral work, mission work in Poland, going to Christ for the Nations Bible School, teaching there periodically in Gdansk, Gdynia area, done some work there, returned to also Russia, another trip to the north, up St. Petersburg and Syktyvkar, up in the Komi Republic. So across those regions, all that kind of melds together to form part of all of who we are and our family, and it has come up to this last December when the Salvation Army, who is now my boss, Ed Dutton from the same Peoria office, came down at the former director had tendered their resignation, and so he came and just got on the phone. He remembered a conversation with the former director when I had resigned from Neighbors to Nations back in April of 2010. She had called up and said, would you pray for this family? They've just left from a church, and at that time I was looking to start my own business, do some other things. But at any rate, that little mention of my name, Ed Dutton remembered that conversation when he came to town a year plus later.
Good grief.
Yeah, this was like, over a year and a half later, and came to town thinking, okay, what do we need to do here? We need another director. The phone service was down. We remember that. It was down for weeks. Had to do extensive work. It took a whole week to get that going. So there were some difficulties in managing that. It was right at the season of Red Kettle. And nothing was happening with that. We had, a lot of irons in the fire, whether we liked it or not, right there. Ed said, you can forget Red Kettle, or you can go with whatever. It's so late. It's up to you. Well, we went with it, and we got the phones going. He did. I didn't really do much of this. It was kudos to the Salvation Army and to the community pitching in. But in December, what started all this, he came and just said, realized, I remember this guy from a year or so ago. How can I get a hold of him? He called the Lincoln area ministerial president at that time, which happened to be my pastor, Larry Crawford, and called the office and said, I'm looking for Tony Shuff. How can I get a hold of him? The secretary knew all about it, knew me, but said, well, I can get a hold of him. Give me your number. He can call you. I called Ed. He was at the Key Center, and I just called him and introduced myself, and his first words were, hey, bud, you want a job? And so we met that day, and I came in, and we talked at the Key Center for 3 or 4 hours that day. By the end of that day, we'd pretty well decided that's what we needed to do, wanted to do. I felt that it was part of what we wanted to see the Salvation Army continue with. I mean, we didn't want to see, things just let go or not without some direction. So probably we bring some new flavor and some new things there, but the things that the Salvation Army has been known for locally, we want to continue to do.
And I want to emphasize that a minute, Tony and Richard, if I may. The Keat Center. Those folks, God love them, left the Salvation Army a significant amount of money to build that nice facility there on Kickapoo Street. And for the most part, it's kind of remained under the radar, so to speak.
Sure.
For one reason or another. It's my understanding, and correct me, because some churches, my own included, gave money to furnish certain rooms up there.
Correct.
And there's little plaques on those rooms. Now, it was our understanding that those were not to be permanent, so obviously permanent, not permanent dwelling, but a temporary housing for some folks who were in real need. Now, as I say, it's been under the radar, and I'm not sure why, but it just things evolve that way often. Can you give us? Can you talk to us specifically about the Key Center and what your hopes and plans are to utilize what has been left for us here?
Sure.
By the Keys family.
Well, it sounds like I'm digressing. I'm not. I'm including Brother Draeger again here. My first meeting with all of you, other than Judy, I've met a few times, but Rich Draeger and I just met today. Talked to him on the phone. So we haven't known each other.
Do you
until
like
an
each
hour.
other?
So far, it's worked out fine. I mean,
That's my Judith.
I don't have a problem with him. Now you'll have to ask.
That'll come
on the
later.
other side of the equation here. But he came in. The last time he was right at that site, it was a grassy area, and the trencher, digger, whatever, something.
Yeah.
The big shovel was going in. Is that?
Yeah,
and that
just
was our
about the
conversation.
groundbreaking. Yeah.
So he says it's great to be here and see the facilities. I didn't take him upstairs or into the full basement there, but there's a second floor overhead that has some rooms. It has a extra room for kind of like a supervisor if there are other families being staged there in the transitional center. It's not really a homeless shelter
No.
per se. It's a emergency
Yeah,
transitional
we
center.
understand,
Now, we just had a fire yesterday. A local family on Singleton Court. That trailer burned, and the Salvation Army was there. We were in communication with them. Our doors were open last night. They're actually going to meet with me a little bit later today. We already have a family that's staying there now. That's not our first family. So this year, we've already housed several families for different emergency needs already. We've been doing that. So we're thankful that we can share this time and let you know and give you a good update that
Yes.
all 3 levels of that place are used all the time. We have book redistribution, clothing redistribution that takes part of those other levels. The conference room there was dedicated by someone anonymously, the Daughters of American Revolution. We hosted them. They wanted to come for their monthly meeting a couple months ago. Lincoln Area Ministerial has met there. Other organizations occasionally meet there.
Good.
From next door, Academic Education Development, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but our partners next door, they work with troubled families, helping with parents in troubled situations. They haven't had a good place to meet and counsel some of the people they work with. They were going to McDonald's little Funland thing, to try and have a family time.
Yeah.
They came to us 2 or 3 months ago, and I said, this is no problem. Let me show you around. And they have had a family up until recently. They would bring them over once a week to sit down for a couple of hours and do their counseling and working with that family. So we're partnering with a lot of agencies. Sojourn, we partnered with them and had some talks and visits. Had a family recently that we ended up not having to house because a local family member wanted to take them in, but it was right there. They were a family with three children, were a lady, and it was a domestic violence issue or case. So
we think we're absolved from those things here in Lincoln, and we aren't. We're part of the world.
Not at all. And so that is why the Key Center was established, and that is what the Key Center is about, and that it is, and it's only part of what we're doing because we're involved in this wonderful camp for the kids.
Okay, we want to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little later, and that's coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. We've been involved. We'll be partnering with the LEPC, the Logan Emergency Planning Committee. I'm part of that. Rich knows about the disaster services that, of course, we offer. Salvation Army has been one of those first responders everywhere. I didn't know this till I came in, but Salvation Army locally has been there over 100 years.
Listen,
I
can
didn't
remember.
know that.
I didn't
can remember.
either.
100 years.
As a kid.
1989?
1889.
I'm sorry, 1889.
Yeah, right. Well, in kinder times, when I was a little shaver, and I remember we used to have the Salvation. They'd come down on the courthouse square in uniform, obviously in uniform, and they'd have play the band, a little 3 or 4 piece group, and they'd stand in a square and pass the hat. And I remember that as a kid. And then my first, real association with the Salvation Army, some 60 years ago, as a kid in uniform. And they were very important to us. So I have strong feelings about that. Now, Rich, the scope of your duties, nice to have you in Lincoln, by the way. Give us the scope of your duties here. You're a territory or regional director?
Yeah, I'm the Assistant Development Director, so I work out of the Peoria office. A lot of the Christmas activities in the Peoria area I'm involved with. So the local officers do the kettles, but I help with the public relations and the media work there. And then I also work with our Christmas committee in Peoria that raises the funds for us in Peoria. But then outside of that, as a divisional staff person as well, I do things like this, or I might go to a corps that's having an event to support them, to help them out with events, to help them out with advisory board development. I mean, one of the challenges we're finding in our organization is much the same as other nonprofits, is finding good people that want to serve on our boards and support the work of people in their local communities. And so that's kind of the same everywhere. You have to find that person that in Peoria, and our board members themselves say this, that our board has become stale, male, and pale. So, you try to be a little more diverse. You try to find some young up-and-comers that maybe already have their kids in grade school or high school, so they have some more free time to support an organization. And so I go to a lot of our locations to try to help the corps officers and the staff find the right people in town. Quite frankly, not to be patronizing, but folks like you who are connected in the community, who know people, who know history of the town, and try to help develop the local boards, because the officers will come and go. And I've been in Peoria 13 years, and we've probably gone through 10 to 12 officers in different levels. But the board is there. Those are the lifelong residents of those local communities. So that's a lot of what I do to try to help build up those groups, so that when the officers do come and go, that there's some continuity in the town. And that's the other probably important thing about the Army. What happens in Lincoln is different than what happens in Springfield or what happens in Peoria or Pekin, based on the community needs. So the Salvation Army always tries to be responsive to what is needed in that community. We have places where we don't have child care. We have other places where child care is one of the best child cares in town. So it really depends on what the local community needs. And one of the great things that Tony mentioned is the partnerships. Salvation Army can't do everything in Lincoln for everybody, but they can work together, and they say, you know what, you have a group, we have a place you can meet.
Yeah.
We'll take care of the housing, maybe you do the job training for them. So that's what the Army tries to do, is work with the other groups in town to make it work together. We can't do everything for everybody, but we can be a player and maybe put those connecting points together.
Well, and that's ever so wise. When Tony was talking about the people next door, I assume it's in the brick building on the corner that used to be the engineering office?
Correct.
Okay. Now, how nice that you have programs that dovetail, and why not both of you feed on that? It's just silly to go over plowed ground. You don't want to repeat that. That's costly. And
Exactly.
it's futile.
Right.
So how smart to get together and know what one another are doing, so that you're not reinventing the wheel all the time.
Exactly. There are opportunities around us, but we want to utilize our resources effectively, and by partnering together as a community, we can accomplish that. Doing the most good. That's what the Salvation Army always goes by, doing the most good. Well, that involves us, but it's not all about us. It's all about Him, and that leads me to one other thing that I need to underscore here. With 8, maybe 9 out of 10 people that come, I can't say 100%, but most everyone that comes through there, whether it's for energy assistance, water assistance, housing or rent assistance, that we do bits and pieces of that. We have to screen things. We want to be effective in what we do with that. But around all that is some immediate, touching their heart, as well as putting something in their hand. It's not so much about a hand out, but as many have already said, a coined phrase, it's a hand up. And with that comes encouragement and prayer and biblical counsel. I try to, in the maybe 5 or 10 minutes I'm with someone, find out where the real need is. One lady came about 3 or 4 weeks ago just for a food basket, needed a food voucher. Well, we had some there, not a lot, because a lot of it's for the center with people in emergency transition. But we prepared to give her some food, but I felt arrested inside, and I needed to talk with her. She was troubled. I could tell about many things. And I said, have you ever had a clean slate? She stopped and looked at me, and she said, are you kidding? Never. And I said, would you like a clean slate? And tears just flowed down her face. And I said, Jesus Christ offers you right now a clean slate. You may not have a second chance at a lot of things that we've done wrong, but you can have a fresh start. And that can happen right now. It can happen for any of our listeners. They have to know that there can be a marked time, because it's not about politicians and it's not about other agendas or even ideas or things we do, but it's about a relationship. And you know, we're relational. Salvation Army is very relational. It's not about just all the business of it, but it's about people.
And you know, Rich, hate to interrupt you, or Tony, I'm sorry, but this station has a relationship with what's called sponsors. And we're going to take a sponsored break right now and come back. And we want to talk about some of the things that you brought some information on some programs. We want to get specific about that. All right, Mr. Ash?